So in today's video, I want to show you how you can figure out whether your weak glutes are actually weak or just inhibited or deactivated by something else. As a physiotherapist clinically, I've seen a lot of patients over the years who have come in with weak glutes or been told that one or both of their glutes are weak. But when we do the thing that we're about to get to, it turns out that they're not physically weak, but the power that those muscles are producing, the dial has been turned down a little bit because of dysfunction coming from somewhere else. And the good thing about this is there's some very simple things that you can do straight away to take away that hidden dysfunction to potentially see an instant improvement in the strength of your gluteal muscles straight away. So let's get into it. So before we get to the exercise that I'm about to go through, we need to first take a baseline measurement of how strong or weak your gluteal muscles feel currently so that we have something to compare it to after doing this exercise so that you can categorically understand whether it's actually having an impact on your symptoms or it isn't. Because there are genuine, legitimate reasons why a gluteal muscle has genuinely become weaker, whether you've suffered some trauma to the area, maybe you've had surgery like a hip replacement, perhaps you don't use your glutes enough or in the right way throughout the day, which prompts that musculature to weaken over time. But as I mentioned before, clinically, there's a large number of people out there whose glutes aren't just naturally weaker on one side or both, but being inhibited or deactivated by something else completely unnecessarily. So a really simple test that you can do beforehand is just to lie down on your side and do some clams. Ideally, you would have someone here resisting your legs so that you're pushing up into that, trying to take note of how strong or weak or just a general sense of how easy it feels to push up against a resistance. So if you don't have another person or if it feels a bit awkward using your hand, just do 5 or 6 clams as high as you feel comfortable going without rolling backwards. Just take a general sense of how many you feel you can do before you start to notice some fatigue. Take note of how much fatigue you get and how that fatigue feels for you. The other thing you can try is having your legs out straight. We can do a side lying abduction movement to test the same thing. Now the abduction movement does more of your gluteal muscles. The clam tends to do more of your hip external rotators. Again, I'm going to lump all of these in together under the banner of glutes because different people can be weak in different areas potentially. But the purpose of this is to do a movement that you feel comfortable doing that gives you a strong sense of how strong or potentially weak your hip muscles feel, because we're going to use this as a baseline to come back to after doing the exercise we're about to go through to see if there's any genuine improvement in how that feels for you. And let me know in the comments down below how you feel before you do this, and then come back after doing this exercise and let me know what, if anything, actually happened. So the exercise that I'm about to go through draws heavily from what I've come to understand clinically as a physiotherapist, trying to improve weak glutes. Over the last 15 to 20 years, I've always been very interested in trying to understand why something is the way that it is, particularly if you are someone who has one gluteal muscle that feels weaker on your left-hand side, but the other side feels relatively normal. To my brain, there has to be a reason why one side of your body feels weaker than the other, especially in the absence of any trauma or anything obvious and interesting that stands out that might explain why. And what I've come to understand is that if you are stiff, tight, and restricted at the base of your rib cage and the top of your lower back, this section of your spine can inhibit, deactivate, or short circuit the function of your gluteal muscles. And while that can sound a bit surprising to hear, the reason why I want to structure the video in this way, where you test your glute strength first, then do the exercise that I'm about to show you, and then come back and retest it again, is that I don't want you to feel like you have to trust me. We want to base this on tangible, repeatable results so that you can start to feel comfortable that you've found something that may explain why one glute or both glutes are weaker than they potentially could be. And then if you do this exercise and feel like your strength magically returns to some degree, then that is a real effect that you can reproduce yourself going forwards. And it may save you from having to do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks of glute strength training or glute strength maintenance exercises just for that reason. Because if we're getting to the cause of that inhibition or that deactivation and getting rid of that, then it may not necessarily have to be something that you need to focus on specifically beyond just using your hip muscles day to day. So the exercise we want to get to can be done using either a foam roller or a lacrosse ball, tennis ball, spiker ball, whatever you've got lying around the house. For this video, we'll go through it with a foam roller because it visually tends to give a much better representation of where to look and what to do. So as I mentioned, the area of interest can be different for most people, but we're looking towards the base of your rib cage down towards the lumbar spine. So we're going to place that, say, right on the junction, and then I'll get you to lie down onto your back. And as we go through on the channel all the time, there's two sort of versions of this that you can do. If this is comfortable for you, where your hips are on the ground, you can have your hands behind your head and then gently recline backwards over the roller as far as you feel comfortable. The other way that you can do this is just the reverse. We have your shoulders and head on the ground, and then once you've found a level that feels a little bit stiff, you can then drop your hips down to tension that section up specifically. But again, for the purposes of this, I'll just do it from this position. But essentially what we're looking for, the misconception with foam rolling, is that we don't actually want you to roll up and down the spine, or at least not for this specific exercise. What I'd like you to do is move the roller up and down sort of around the base of that rib cage. Go looking for anything that feels stiff, tight, hard, thick, or restricted. It may feel tender, it may not, especially if you're not walking around with any overt lower back pain or symptoms. But for me, I can find a spot here that feels a little bit stiffer than I'd like it to be. Now from here, we want to compare whether the left-hand side of your spine or the right-hand side of your spine feels the most restricted. And what we want to get you to do is, once you've found the side that feels the most restricted and the area that feels the most restricted for you, I just want to get you to gently recline back over that as far as you feel comfortable. You can spend some time here letting the roller push into the soft tissue and the joints of your spine. Again, I put out a video a couple of weeks ago on why foam rolling your lower back is inherently safe. So if you have any reservations of doing this, please go and watch that video just to allay any of the fears that you may have. But ultimately, we're trying to be very respectful. We're just trying to find things that feel stiff, tight, and restricted, and respectfully ask them to be less stiff, tight, and restricted. And again, there's neural connections in this area, particularly called dermatomes, which can wash over different parts of your body and deactivate or inhibit or affect the function of the tissue in that area in some way. Gently move the roller up a little bit or down a little bit to find the next most relevant spot to you, and then repeating that process. Now, while you're here, what you can also do to speed this up if there's some soft tissue restriction over the top is you can tense the muscles in between your back and the roller for 5 to 10 seconds, so that when you stop tensing, they'll give a little bit. You might find it then softens it up a little bit more for you, and you might be able to go that little bit further than you could before. Once you spend some time mobilizing any of the stiffnesses and tightnesses that you've found, it's really important that you immediately come back and retest the things that you did at the start of this video. So again, if you come back to doing your clams again, do the same number that you did before. Take note of how that feels when your fatigue kicks in. Compare that to how the straight leg abduction motion feels as well. And again, I'm not just saying this, it would be easy for me to do this, but this genuinely feels a fraction lighter for me than it did before. I'm very lucky that I don't necessarily identify as having gluteal weakness, but even just by spending 30 seconds or 60 seconds mobilizing that stiff section that I found in my spine, this feels marginally easier than it did before. Please don't take my word for this. All that matters in this video is what you feel happens to your gluteal muscles after doing that spinal mobility drill. So again, in the comments below, please let me know what you found happened. If you found nothing, please tell me. But I'd be willing to bet that a large majority of people who identify as having one weak glute or weak glutes on both sides may see an immediate improvement in how those tests feel after doing that exercise. And so the final thing that I want to touch on quickly in this video is a theme that I'm trying really heavily to promote in most of my videos. Again, the theme of why something happens is something that I don't think we focus on enough. We don't ask this question enough. Often we just assume something happens because it happens. And clinically as a physiotherapist, that attitude is not good enough, because there is in fact a genuine reason for why everything happens to the human body, at least musculoskeletally in the things that I see day to day. And in the same vein as trying to understand why one or both of your glutes feel weaker when it could be your spine that's inhibiting or deactivating those tissues, there has to be a reason why that exact part of your spine has become stiff, tight, and restricted compared to the ones above and below that you may have felt weren't as stiff, tight, and restricted. But the idea that I think is the most important in this conversation to understand why we're having these conversations in the first place is that if there's a segment of your spine that feels the most restricted, I'd be willing to bet that if you were to chronicle the things that you did with your body the most throughout the day, not necessarily the active, interesting things, but the more stationary, sedentary, set positions that you get into, and for most people that might be sitting, the shapes and the postures that you might be putting your back into the most, whether you're on the couch at home, driving long distance, standing, leaning over a bench top, sitting on the couch using your phone, using your computer, you might find that if you lose a good posture, that's the section of your spine that you might be hinging through unknowingly. Because what I tend to see clinically is where the hinge goes, that sustained hinge over time, your body being an adaptive piece of machinery, will start to adapt to the load that you put through a specific area. And if you're isolating a certain part of your spine, putting more load through that area, your body will naturally start to reinforce that area with joint stiffness, muscle tightness, to support you in your quest to keep doing that position, even if you aren't actively asking your body to do that consciously. So to bring all of this full circle, if we don't then have a conversation about what can you do to improve the spinal shapes and positions that you leave your body in the most, ones that might be physically deactivating the muscle strength in your glutes, then again, this isn't something that you're ever going to get a chance to stop doing down the track. So again, please let me know in the comments down below how you found that particular exercise and what it did for you. If you enjoy this type of content, please let me know by leaving a like on the video. Consider subscribing to the channel if you did enjoy this and you found it insightful and helpful. But at the end of the day, I genuinely hope that that was helpful, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.